For over a century, our electrical grid has been, well, pretty simple. Think of it like a one-way street. You've got these giant power plants at one end and our homes and businesses at the other, with all the power flowing in just one direction. But that's all changing, and it's changing fast. We are right in the middle of this massive transformation, turning that simple one-way street into a complex, multi-lane superhighway with on-ramps and off-ramps popping up everywhere. So let's break down what this huge shift is all about.
So, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the old problem and the new idea that's shaking things up. Then, we'll get into the exciting stuff, the promise of generating power locally. After that, we'll hit the reality check, the huge new challenges this creates for our grid, especially when it comes to safety and just keeping the system stable. And finally, we'll look at the incredible solutions engineers are cooking up and what it all means for our energy future.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. To really get where we're going, you first have to understand the system we're leaving behind and the powerful new concept that's taking its place, something called distributed generation, or DG for short. I want you to picture the old grid like a giant reservoir way up in the mountains. It sends water downhill through these huge pipes to all the towns below. Simple, right? It only flows one way. That's our centralized grid. But now look at the contrast on this slide. The new, distributed grid, it's more like having thousands of little local wells in every single neighborhood. They can pull water out when they need it, but, and this is the critical part, they can also pump their extra water back into the system for their neighbors to use. All of a sudden, you've got two-way traffic, and that changes everything. So why are we even doing this? Well, that old system is really starting to show its age. I mean, trying to send electricity over hundreds of miles is just wildly inefficient. A ton of that power just gets lost as heat along the way. Plus, the farther you live from the power plant, the more your voltage can sag and fluctuate. And of course, the whole model depends on a handful of massive centralized plants, which have almost always been powered by fossil fuels, all while our global appetite for electricity is absolutely skyrocketing. And this brings us to the hero of our story, distributed generation. You can think of DG as just an umbrella term for any tech that makes power right where it's going to be used. We're talking everything from the solar panels on your neighbor's roof to that big wind turbine on a nearby farm or even a local factory's own little power unit. The big idea is simple: make power locally. And let me tell you, people are very excited about this. This isn't just some small adjustment. It promises a complete revolution in how we even think about energy. Let's dig into why this pretty difficult transition is seen as being so worth it. Welcome to the honeymoon phase of our story. I mean, just look at this list of benefits. It's pretty staggering. With power being made right down the street, there's way less risk of a huge, widespread outage. It means a massive step away from our reliance on fossil fuels and all the emissions that come with them. And because the power doesn't have to travel as far, you get better power quality, fewer voltage drops, and a much more reliable network. Oh, and here's a huge one for the utility companies. It means they might be able to put off spending billions of dollars on building out massive new transmission lines. And this isn't some fantasy for the future. It is happening right now, and it's happening fast. Just look at this data. In a single year, from 2016 to 2017, the world's renewable capacity jumped by 8.3%. That's an extra 167 gigawatts of clean power, mostly from these distributed sources. This is a real, measurable shift that is already happening all over the planet. But you knew there had to be a but, right? As with any big revolution, there's always a twist. While DG is an amazing idea, trying to plug this brand new concept into a system that's a century old, well, it creates a whole bunch of massive, unexpected problems. The honeymoon is over, and now the real work begins. You know, the root problem is beautifully simple, but the consequences are incredibly complex. The entire grid, every single wire, every transformer, every switch, was designed and built on one single assumption: power flows in one direction, period. DG completely shatters that assumption. Now we have that two-way traffic we talked about, and our old road system just wasn't built to handle cars going the wrong way down the highway.
And this one core problem gives birth to two main villains in our story. First up, protection failures. All the safety systems that protect the grid are suddenly getting mixed signals. I mean, how do you protect against a down power line when the danger can come from two directions at once? And our second villain, voltage chaos. How do you keep the grid's voltage perfectly balanced when thousands and soon millions of little power plants like rooftop solar panels are turning on and off every time a cloud passes overhead?
This slide really gets to the heart of what causes these problems:
uncertainty, right? Solar and wind are amazing, but they're not always on. So to fight this, engineers have come up with this incredible toolkit. We've got things like pump storage, which is basically a giant water battery. We have electric cars that can soak up extra solar power during the day and feed it back to the grid at night. We've got huge battery systems and even hybrid farms that mix wind and solar to smooth things out. These are the tools we need to tame that unpredictability.
Okay, let's take on our first villain head on, the protection puzzle. This is all about making sure the grid stays safe for all of us, and especially for the utility workers who have to go out there and fix it. In the old one-way grid, safety was pretty straightforward. Imagine a tree falls and knocks down a power line. That creates what's called a fault, basically a short circuit. Immediately, a huge surge of electricity rushes to that spot, but it only comes from one direction, the big power plant. Simple devices called relays are like little watchdogs. They see this giant one-way surge and instantly trip a circuit breaker, cutting the power to that line and keeping everything safe. Easy enough. But now, let's add a local solar farm into the mix. Same scenario. Tree falls, line comes down, a fault happens. But this time, the massive surge of current doesn't just come from the main power plant. It also comes from the local solar farm, feeding into the fault from the other direction. And that simple old relay, the one designed to only look for danger from one direction, it is now completely and totally confused. It might not see the fault at all, or even worse, it might see the current coming from the solar farm and mistakenly shut down a perfectly healthy part of the grid. And the consequences of this confusion are really serious. You get things like erroneous tripping, which means parts of the grid that are totally fine get shut down, causing blackouts for no reason. You get impaired sensitivity, where the relays are basically blinded and don't see a real fault, which can lead to equipment getting fried. But the most dangerous one is something called unintentional islanding. This is where a part of the grid gets cut off from the main utility, but it's kept alive and energized by a local DG unit. A line worker, thinking that line is dead, could go to work on it and be exposed to a live wire. It's a massive safety risk. So yeah, clearly, the old rulebook for protecting the grid is totally obsolete. We need a new one. And that's exactly what engineers have been doing, creating a whole new playbook full of smart, advanced strategies to keep this modern grid safe. One of the star players in this new playbook is called adaptive protection. Think of it like this. We're upgrading from a simple tripwire alarm to a super intelligent security system. These systems are constantly monitoring the grid. They know when a big solar farm comes online or when the wind suddenly dies down, and they can automatically adjust their own settings in real time to respond to these changes, which means they can always spot a real problem no matter which way the power is flowing. Another brilliant tool is the fault current limiter, or FCL. The best way to think about this is as an electrical shock absorber. You install it right alongside a solar farm or other DG unit, and most of the time, it just sits there doing nothing. But the instant it detects a fault on the grid, it springs into action and limits that massive surge of current that the DG unit can pump out. It doesn't stop it completely, but it dampens the blow enough so that the older protection systems downstream have a much better chance of doing their job correctly. Okay, we've got a plan for our first villain. We know how to keep the grid safe. Now let's turn to villain number 2, that wild, unpredictable voltage roller coaster that all these new DG sources are creating. So you might be thinking, why is voltage suddenly such a huge deal? What's the actual problem that we're trying to solve here? Here's the heart of the problem. Picture a really sunny afternoon in a suburb where pretty much every house has solar panels. All those panels are cranking out tons of electricity, but a lot of people are still at work, so not much power is actually being used in the neighborhood. All that extra power has to go somewhere, right? So it flows backwards onto the local grid. This reverse power flow acts like you're overinflating a tire. It pushes the electrical pressure, the voltage, up and up, sometimes to levels that can damage your appliances and the grid equipment itself. But just like with the safety problem, engineers have a whole new, amazing toolkit to manage this voltage challenge. It's a really cool mix of clever upgrades to old technology and some truly futuristic ideas, all designed to keep that voltage roller coaster nice and smooth. Let's check out a few of them. Our first tool is network reconfiguration. This is basically like giving the grid its own smart traffic management system, kind of like Waze for electricity. By remotely opening and closing switches all over the network, operators can literally change the path the electricity takes in real time. So if one street is getting congested with too much solar power, causing high voltage, they can just reroute that power down a different path that has more room. It's like a GPS finding a way around a traffic jam. And the impact is not small.
The research shows that just by being smarter about how we route our electricity, this kind of intelligent network reconfiguration can cut overall power losses by an incredible 10 to 20%. That is a massive gain in efficiency, which means less wasted energy for everybody. Next up is one of the real high-tech superstars, the StatCom. This is a powerful piece of electronics that acts like a super fast stabilizer for the grid. It's constantly watching the voltage, and if it starts to sag or surge, the StatCom can instantly inject or absorb something called reactive power to smooth things out. And its key advantage is speed. We're talking a response time of less than 10 milliseconds. That is literally faster than you can blink your eye. And another huge win for modern tech, as you can see here, is its size. Compared to older devices that try to do a similar job, a StatCom is way smaller, often 50 to 70% smaller. That makes it so much easier and cheaper to install, especially in crowded urban areas where every square foot of space counts. Now this one is just so elegant. Every solar panel system and every battery has a device called an inverter. It's the brain of the system. In the past, these were just dumb devices that pushed out as much power as they could. But modern smart inverters can be controlled. We can now tell them to use a little bit of their brain power to help stabilize the local voltage. So the very same devices that can cause the voltage problem can now be programmed to be part of the solution. How cool is that? And finally, we have demand-side management, or DSM. And this is where you and me, actually become active players in balancing the grid. Through smart devices and different utility programs, we can shift when we use energy. So, for example, instead of everyone's water heater kicking on at 6 p.m., they can be staggered. There's even a futuristic concept mentioned in the research called electric springs, smart devices in our homes that could constantly adjust their power use second by second to act like little shock absorbers for the grid. So, after battling these villains of protection and voltage, what does the future actually look like? Well, we are actively, right now, building a grid that is fundamentally different from anything we've had before. It's going to be smarter, way more flexible, and ultimately much more resilient. All right, so let's recap the whole story. We started with this old one-way grid that was struggling to keep up. The amazing promise of local, distributed power seemed like the perfect answer, but it brought its own villains to the fight: protection failures and the voltage roller coaster. But we've seen that engineers had this incredible new toolkit, smart relays, StatComs, intelligent controls, to tame these challenges and pave the way for a very different and much better grid of the future. And look, don't just take my word for it. The authors of the source paper we've been looking at wrap it up perfectly. They say that by tackling these challenges head-on, we can make sure this massive transition to local renewable power is a smooth one, and that it will lead to a more resilient and efficient energy system for all of us. You know, this isn't some abstract thing happening far away. This transformation is happening right now in our own communities, with every single new solar panel that gets installed and every electric car that gets plugged in. The power grid is becoming a part of our neighborhoods in a way it never has been before. So the final question is, now that we understand the challenges and we see the solutions, are we really ready for it?